Hi, folks. You know, Democrats these days have gone from preaching tolerance to treating political violence like open mic night, and unfortunately, their base is eating it up. Now, today, we're looking at Destiny calmly saying conservatives need to fear getting offed, so they'll turn to their leaders for calm, which is about as logical as setting your kitchen on fire so you can appreciate the smoke alarm. But today, we're starting off with Bob Vylan, you know, this so-called musician dedicating a song to Charlie Kirk's assassination in typical leftist Marxist fashion.
I want to dedicate this next one to an absolute piece of shit of a human being. The pronouns was, were. Because if you chat shit, you will get banned. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, you piece of shit.
And that is supposedly the side of empathy. You can't make this stuff up, folks. These people don't just hate you. They want you dead. And they'll dance on your grave proudly like it's performance art afterwards. That's who they are. Literal demons. I don't know any other way to put it. Truly despicable, soulless. To strip someone who just passed away, a father, a son, a husband, of their humanity completely and then celebrate it on stage as though that's your art? Really? That's the bar now? And honestly, I'm questioning the sanity of the audience too. You're watching a man justify murder and call it entertainment and you cheer? You're not even the slightest bit repulsed by this open display of hatred? Folks, these are the same people who for years have lectured us about systemic oppression, spinning up theories, hijacking institutions, and presenting themselves as eternal victims. That's the script no matter what. They're oppressed. Even when they victimize others. Even when they cheer for murder. Even when they strip away dignity from somebody who was just assassinated in front of their family. They still insist they're the real victims. And let's be clear for a second. I'm not even talking about race. I'm not talking about culture. I'm talking about specifically leftism. About the poisonous ideology itself. Because this is what leftism breeds, folks. A death cult dressed up in slogans about justice, a movement that rationalizes hatred and violence and sells it back to the public as empathy. And the fact that it has infected so many cultural spheres from art, music, education, and media, it only proves how dangerous it truly is. It's not just disgusting, it's completely destabilizing. It's a worldview that celebrates cruelty while preaching compassion. And it's completely tearing our society apart. Anyway, this fool later issued a video where he quote-unquote apologized, which in leftist terms actually means he just gaslit, completely rewrote history, deflected, and, you know, did a whole bunch of other things that I'm sure you'll enjoy.
Yo, real quick. At no point during yesterday's show was Charlie Kirk's death celebrated.
What?
At no point whatsoever did we celebrate Charlie Kirk's death.
What?
I did call him a piece of shit. That much is true.
Yeah.
But at no point was his death celebrated.
Liar.
If it was, go find me a quote. Go find me something that proves that we were celebrating.
Bro, we got the
his
video.
death.
You're dancing.
You're not going to find it because it didn't happen. What did happen is one reporter that bought their ticket online came with the sole purpose of finding something to report, and after I called him a piece of shit and we played a song, they have written that up as a celebration. Not a celebration. Isn't a celebration. Wasn't a celebration. Calm down.
The sheer level of shamelessness it takes to pretend we didn't just see what's on the video. What anyone with a pair of eyes and thumbs can find in seconds, it's just mind-blowing. Bob Vylan literally said Charlie Kirk's pronouns are was, were, and if you chat shit, you will get banged. And the crowd cheered. That's not ambiguous, folks. That's not misreported. That's celebration of a man's assassination. Yet now he doubles back, claiming it never even happened, that it's just a reporter twisting things. But the internet receipts don't lie. His denial post has been ratioed into the ground. Tens of thousands of comments, people posting different camera angles, captions, side-by-side video proof, all showing him for what he is, a liar. He was even community noted on X, which is about as public as fact check as it gets. And instead of correcting himself, instead of showing any sliver of remorse, he just leans in, milking the outrage for what we can only assume is ticket sales and Spotify streams. It's not just shameless, folks. It's straight up demonic, trying to profit off dancing on someone's grave. It's the definition of low-life behavior, and the fact that it gets rewarded in today's culture says more about the sickness of Democrat institutions than it does about one man's ego. Anyway, that guy wasn't the only scumbag to try to attack Charlie after he had his life taken from him in a brutal way and is not here to defend himself. This man decided to vandalize the memorial for Charlie Kirk at the Turning Point USA headquarters in Arizona. Wow. Why would you do that, man? Absolutely unbelievable.
A man trampled the memorial for Charlie Kirk at the Turning Point headquarters in Phoenix. This happened not too long ago. Our photog on the scene says the man kicked over flowers, vases, and balloons.
Wow.
He was taken to the ground by an onlooker and then arrested.
Despicable doesn't even begin to cover it. It is unbelievable just how petty and vengeful Democrats can be. The man is dead. Charlie's gone. He's not here to defend himself. And this is how people are responding. People on the left are responding by trampling a memorial. What people need to understand is that these tributes are not for the person who has passed necessarily. They're for the people left behind. Memorials are created to give grieving families, friends, and supporters a way to honor a life cut short and to process their own pain. So in Charlie's case, he's with Jesus in a much better place. But those flowers, candles, and prayers were left by people still here. People mourning his loss. People trying to celebrate his memory by vandalizing that space. This young man wasn't just disrespecting Charlie. He was insulting the millions who've been absolutely impacted by his assassination. The families, his family, the communities holding vigils, the countless individuals grieving across the country and the world, as we've seen in the last few days. That's what makes this so low. It's not just antisocial behavior. It's cruelty aimed at those already in pain. And whether it was for clout or pure spite, it shows the depth of this culture that Democrats have enabled in America today that has completely lost even the most basic respect and level of decency towards mourning. Oh, but it goes even further because some failed Democrat media personalities like Don Lemon are having just full-blown meltdowns over Charlie Kirk being called a civil rights leader or there being people supporting Charlie. I mean, it is unbelievable, to say the least.
Most people had no idea who Charlie Kirk was, by the way. You know that, right? I meet a lot of people out there, and you see my lives. They're like, I didn't really know him. I just heard about him when this happened.
More people don't even
because
know
it was
who you
mostly
are,
for like
dude.
younger people who are really politically activated, like college people who are, just wanted to, college people like to fight on campus. When I went to school at LSU, we had something very similar, and it was called Free Speech Alley. I think Free Speech Alley is still there, where you could go to Free Speech Alley and you could say whatever you want. The thing is that you could then, and you would not get suspended or expelled or, disciplined for saying some shit. People just said whatever it is that they wanted at Free Speech Alley.
What's your point, dude?
Much of it was offensive, but I kind of liked Free Speech Alley.
You don't seem like you like free speech,
That's not the America that
bro.
we're living in right now. We live in an America of cancel culture, and it is the cancel culture on the right now.
Oh, my God, bro. Come on.
That is leading the charge. And
Get
the hypocrisy,
a life.
I've been writing something about this. The hypocrisy on the right about free speech is, it's off the charts. Because think about it. If you actually believed in what Charlie Kirk said he believed in, didn't quite practice all the time, is free speech, then why are you out to cancel people who are using their First Amendment right of free speech to tell you how they feel about Charlie Kirk by using his own words?
That's what is happening.
It doesn't make sense because Charlie Kirk didn't make sense. And so the response is irrational.
What?
So they're trying to, all these people are Nancy Mace and Megyn Kelly and all these people, they can't figure out how they want to respond. Is he a crazy loony left liberal? Is he some sort of incel? Is he a furry? Is he whatever?
Loony left.
They're spinning, trying to, how do we make this make sense? You can't, because it doesn't make sense. Because this is a myth. You're trying to build a myth on a myth. It makes sense if you
care about facts.
The things that came out of Charlie Kirk's mouth were much of it was hurtful, discriminatory,
get a life,
ignorant.
Jesus.
And I'll stop there, to say the least.
Oh, that's the least? Is this Don Lemon's whole show now? Just crying on stream He's not even making points, folks. It's just a total meltdown on loop. That's what Democrats have been reduced to. Whining on air without a shred of substance, no rebuttal, no evidence, no attempt to argue with facts. Instead, it's all ad hominem attacks, cheap theatrics, and emotional manipulation. He calls Charlie Kirk hurtful, discriminatory, and ignorant, as if that excuses people celebrating his assassination. Lemon rants about cancel culture on the right while ignoring the decades the left has spent perfecting cancellation as a political weapon, digging up literal tweets from a decade ago to get Kevin Hart removed from hosting the Oscars. That's the leftist version of cancel culture, folks. Meanwhile, Democrats are upset that people on the right are rightfully calling out people who are posting online their glee about somebody being assassinated. Something that is reprehensible. That's why they're losing their jobs. Nobody forced these folks to post this now. All of this is within context, and it is being sent to their employers, and their employers are making the ultimate decision. At the end of the day, this is just people living with the consequences of their actions. And look, I understand where the mentality of snitches get stitches come from. You don't snitch. That's ultimately what we've been told for decades. The reality is we don't live in that society anymore. People are snitching on themselves. They're posting this stuff online for anybody to see. So if they are willing to share this and potentially, likely in many cases, go viral over their absolutely despicable behavior, forwarding that to a employer isn't actually that crazy. That employer may have even seen it and not even thought twice about how reprehensible that behavior is. But then when confronted with the reality of the situation, that this person is celebrating the vicious murder of a father, a family man, and a son, then they think twice and are like, oh yeah, maybe I don't want to have somebody like that in my business. Maybe I don't want to employ somebody with that low level of moral virtue. Anyway, Don claims conservatives are irrational for demanding accountability, as if mocking Charlie's death is some sacred act of free speech. This is the pattern with Democrats, folks. Strip away truth, replace it with feelings, and cry foul when the public sees directly through it. It's shameless, it's hollow, and it reveals what Democrats have become: not defenders of debate or truth, but peddlers of outrage who think tears can cover for the fact that their ideas have absolutely no leg to stand on. And it is insane that anybody is carrying water for people who are dancing on someone's grave. Can we just go back to normalcy where this is unacceptable, where both sides can condemn something? And how about if you don't want people to report you at your job for your post, don't post it. If you are that awful of a human being that it brings you joy that somebody had their life viciously taken from them by being shot in the neck, if you're that kind of person, then how about you just keep it to yourself? You ever heard of, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say it? How about you just stick to that?
You might think that I'm taking glee in his death. Well, that's not you. Most people wouldn't think that. Most rational people don't think that. Most people who don't think through a right-wing, crazy MAGA brain ideology will understand that you can say, I'm sorry for what happened to him. I don't believe that anyone should die that way. I don't think he deserves that.
Well, you surely don't act like it.
I have empathy for his family and his children and all of that.
Doesn't sound like it.
But yet, I don't understand this other part. I mean, would you do that around other people in history who made awful remarks like that? So for people who are making sense and trying to explain it to you and then putting his own words up for you to try to get you to understand, like, you're doing too much here. And I'm going to tell you why. It has nothing to do with your core beliefs or that he was as Glenn Beck said, but whatever the fuck is crazy, that he was some sort of civil rights icon or civil rights leader. No.
He was. Yes, he was.
And do not put him on on a page or a picture with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That is even more insulting. But I'm not easily triggered. I see what you're doing. So let me tell you what you're doing.
Why?
And you guys need some therapy.
Okay.
You are trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense because you know that's not Charlie Kirk. He wasn't that.
Let me just say this, folks. Charlie Kirk was, in fact, a civil rights leader. That's what he was. And I know the immediate question some will inevitably ask is, well, what civil rights did he fight for? How about your freedom of speech? How about your right to defend yourself? Charlie built a movement that mobilized young voters, a minority group in American politics, only 13 to 15% of the electorate, and dedicated his life to securing their equal opportunity to participate in our republic. By definition, that is civil rights leadership. Turning Point USA wasn't just about slogans. It was about educating young people on limited government, free markets, and freedom, and giving them the tools to push back against institutions hostile to their values. So when Democrats mock that, when Don Lemon sneers at the idea of calling Charlie a civil rights leader, it exposes the dishonesty of their framing. They want civil rights to mean only one thing: their ideology, their causes, their heroes. But the term has always meant something broader: protecting fundamental freedoms for groups that are marginalized or silenced. By that measure, Charlie fits the definition very well. And denying that isn't about truth. It's about guarding a monopoly that Democrats desperately want on moral legitimacy. That's the fight that we're seeing playing out right now. They're gripping onto having the moral high ground like their life depends on it. But guess what? They lost it already. And you need to look no further than streamers like Destiny, who recently said this about Charlie on Piers Morgan.
Cox has made it clear that their investigation has now established that he had been radicalized by a leftist ideology, which drove him to do this. That's just
I'm sorry, excuse me, when?
Yesterday, he said that.
No. When was he radicalized? In the 6 months that he did remote college?
I don't know when he was radicalized, but I do know.
What you just said
I do
is not
know
true.
the very reasonable sounding governor of Utah has made it clear that the
he hasn't made it
you may
clear.
not want
He
to
said
hear
this is
this.
an ongoing investigation.
You may not want to
you
hear
don't
it,
wanna
Destiny.
it,
But the reality is the investigators, according to the governor of Utah, have established that he was radicalized to a leftist ideology that drove him to murder Charlie Kirk. Now, let me just ask you.
That's just not true.
Let me just ask
There's
you.
no way to deal with it.
Okay,
You're living in
you're
a
accusing the
delusional
governor of
fantasy.
lying.
Yeah.
That's your prerogative. But
Sure.
if it turns out to have been somebody with a leftist ideology who wanted to shut up Charlie Kirk, would you condemn that?
I won't condemn anything until the president of the United States can go on air and say, all of us need to calm down.
So you won't condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk until Donald Trump says something.
I'm a YouTuber. Leftists and Democrats have been condemning and turning down the temperature, condemning violence, turning down the temperature for a decade.
How?
Donald Trump can't go on TV and say, all of us need to calm down.
Right.
Can you tell me why he cannot
Why
tell
would you
his
expect
side
anybody,
to calm down?
Destiny?
You can't answer that. Can you answer that question? Why can't
can
Trump
you
go on
answer
TV
this
and say,
question?
all of us should be less violent?
Why do you
can't
think
Trump say that?
Why do you
Why
think
is your
Trump say
behavior
that?
contingent on Donald Trump?
I'm insane right now.
Why do you think?
your
No, let me
behavior
ask you a
contingent
question.
on Donald Trump?
Let me
Why
ask
is
you a
that
question.
What a disgusting little troll of a man, built like a bowl of jello and somehow even shakier when pressed to answer a basic moral question. Of course, Destiny can't bring himself to condemn Charlie Kirk's assassination because the Democrats don't want to condemn it. They love this, folks. They thrive on it. Destiny claims YouTubers and Democrats have been lowering the temperature, cooling rhetoric down. That's a lie. For years now, they've been the ones turning it up, making violence seem normal, even necessary. Destiny himself made jokes the moment Charlie was assassinated, and he's not alone. Hassan has entire compilations where he eggs on his audience with violent rhetoric. This isn't an accident, folks. This is strategy. They gaslight, deny, stall, because they know that if they just hold their line long enough, the conversation will shift and they'll get to reclaim the moral high ground without ever being held accountable. That's the cycle. Escalate the hate, celebrate when it turns violent, and then lie their way back to innocence. And they do it because they believe they'll never be forced to admit what they've become. And that is just straight up awful, demonic human beings. And I hesitate to use the word human being to define these folks because they are lesser than that. They're like scum of the earth at this point. Bottom of the barrel isn't even good enough for them. So the question we're left with, folks, is this. How much longer are we going to tolerate a culture that rewards lies, excuses violence, and gaslights us into doubting what we see with our own eyes? How long before we admit that the people claiming to defend democracy are the ones eroding its very foundation? These moments aren't just isolated scandals, folks. They're signals of a deeper rot in our institutions, our media, and even our public square. And if Democrats can twist reality this easily, if they can celebrate cruelty while preaching compassion, what does that say about where we're headed as a nation? That's not just their problem. That's our collective problem. So ask yourself, are we willing to keep swallowing the Democrat narrative, or are you ready to question it and fight back against a culture that thrives on your silence? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.